Nano Machine by Chun Yeowun. Chapter 398. Rise to the 5 Strongest Warriors. Part 1. Around 5 miles away from the Jin Castle were the Baihan Mountains. Several trees were standing on the peak of the mountain. Among those trees was a person who elegantly tiptoed on a branch of the tallest pine tree. It was an unidentified man wearing a long black robe and a bamboo hat. He was standing on a branch for around half an hour and was looking at some place, not taking his eyes off of said place. The direction of Jin Castle was the place where the man in the black robe was looking towards. It is too far away, so I can't get a good look. This man was being looked at by another man from below. A man with bandages on his face was standing right underneath the pine tree. Even without standing on the branches, just being on the peak of the mountain was enough to see the vast land below. However, everything was so small that even the people looked like fine dust. Is he really able to see the Jin Castle? He had a strong belief in his skills, but no matter how hard he focused, nothing could be seen well. Seeing Jin Castle felt strange. But seeing that the man on the branch's gaze never fell off of Jin Castle, it seemed like he could see something. It was a moment of wondering what he could actually see. Bang! Huh? The man on the branch soon came down from the pine tree. He didn't just come down normally, he smashed the tree to reach the ground. BL Blade Lord. Shockingly, the true identity of the man on the branch was Blade Lord, the head of the Blade God's 6 martial clan. He had personally come to this place to observe the battle which took place in the castle. Blade Lord opened his mouth and spoke to the flustered man in bandages. "We are heading back." When he revealed his intention to head back, the bandaged man's eyes were filled with confusion. Had the great event proceeded according to the original plan, Blade Lord wouldn't have had such a neutral reaction. Blade Lord. If there was a setback in the plan, how about we send in our slaughter squad? It was an utter defeat. No matter who we send, we won't get the desired results. Defeat? The man in bandages couldn't hide his shock. The plan was something that everyone put in lots of effort into for a long time. From manipulating the eldest prince of the Imperial palace to planting the spies in the clans of Yeowun, everything was the groundwork for this day. How could that happen? If this was a failure, then the wrath of Blade Lord couldn't be expressed in words. The bandaged man trembled in fear. A calm voice responded to the bandaged man who was extremely scared. "It doesn't matter. I managed to obtain something more important." After hearing those words, the eyes of the bandaged man lit up. The reaction he received was completely different to what he initially thought he would see. Blade Lord's voice seemed elevated, pleased even. To the man who was puzzled, Blade Lord spoke. "Because I finally found him." Him? The demon god. The eyes of Blade Lord, who looked through the bamboo hat, flashed. A few hours later, the noises in the Jin Castle, which were full of screams and wails of the warriors, finally subsided. Inside the Jin Castle, which was devastated by the war, it reeked of blood. People couldn't help but frown at the number of corpses lying on the castle floor. The number of veterans who died were close to 600 and the number of the wounded was well over 1,000. It could be called the largest battle that took place in the past 10 years. And the winner of the battle were the allied forces of the demonic cult and Yeowun. The leaders of the forces of evil and the forces of Great Heaven's organization were the only ones who survived this brutal battle. Quack! Kill me! I said kill me. Goodness! How could I ever kill you? You will have to pay for the evil deeds you committed. People tried to commit suicide because of their subordinates who died, but they were caught before they could kill themselves. Yeowun always had their eyes on the forces of evil. Unlike the forces of evil, the battle of the Blade God's 6 martial clan ended rather terrifyingly. It wasn't because the warriors of the demonic cult had no mercy. They are awful people. They didn't leave anyone behind? The 6 swords, including Ko Wonger and Baki, trembled at the sight. The corpses they were looking at had their heads blown off. Most of the warriors of the Blade God's 6 martial clan died on the battlefield, but the warriors of the demonic cult succeeded in capturing 8 of them, as well as 1 master. However, all of a sudden, their heads swelled up and exploded at the same time. Something that was planted in their heads seemed to have activated at the same time, which is the reason why they all died together. They are quite thorough. That even made the great guardian Mara Kim go stiff. The behavior of the Blade God's 6 martial clan was very strange. Whoever led them made absolutely sure that nobody is ever able to get caught or leak any information. What was the information that they were afraid of revealing? But even they must not have expected this. His 2 eyes looked at someone. CRRK. There was still an old man with a bald head with a flinching body due to the shocks. Not only was his hair gone, even his eyebrows had burned to a crisp. The pain and agony that man was going through was truly terrifying. Both of his arms were torn apart and black blood was dripping out of the corners of his mouth. No, Dukyang the Fire Sword Master. This monster. No, Dukyang, who looked like a person who lost his reasoning and soul, kept muttering those words. What was worthwhile was when everyone's heads began to explode, Chun Yeowun succeeded in removing the worm from his head. The dried up black blood was proof of that. How far ahead does the power of the current lord reach? As he had always felt, Chun Yeowun was quite different from the other lords. He couldn't figure out where the limit was. He began to expect that his wishes of witnessing the second Chun Ma might end up becoming true. Maybe Chun Yeowun really was the second generation Chun Ma. Meanwhile, the Yulin and the demonic cult were in conflict over one last issue. Nam Gunkyong, who survived. Hu Bong managed to cut off the arm of Nam Gunkyong, who tried to escape. Coincidentally, leader Moyong Kong was on top of the castle wall too. That's how he was able to stop Hu Bong. He was caught by us. Even if we are in an alliance, you need to follow the rules. How can you force us to hand over our prisoner to you? The Yulin didn't want to give up Nam Gunkyong. It was already a shock knowing the role of Nam Gunkyong. Nam Gunkyong was a leader of the organization, something which he created behind the backs of Yulin, and was secretly joining hands with the Blade God's 6 martial clan in the battle. If we let them take him, the secrets within our Yulin factions will be revealed. Besides, if we hand him over to the demonic cult, the probability of finding information and misusing it would increase. We shouldn't let this happen. The information from the organization needs to be used only for the sake of Yulin factions. All the people of the forces of Great Heaven died in battle. And the only surviving man of the organization had to be killed on the spot as he was an enemy. He couldn't be used as a prisoner. You people caught him? Yes. Hong Pilwo responded. To them, Hu Bong was someone who was aiming to take away the life of Nam Gun Kyong. It was funny for Hu Bong to hear that the Yulin leaders were trying to take credit for catching the wounded man. Excuse me, Leader Nam Gun Kyong. Didn't you run away because I cut your arm with my sword? Hu Bong asked Nam Gun Kyong, who was bound by ropes and held captive. At that, without even making eye contact, Nam Gun Kyong mumbled. There was no such thing. Huh. The cut on your arm must have burned too, can't you get yourself to remember that? You are one hell of a spineless man. Hu Bong's face turned red as he slowly began to get annoyed. If it wasn't for the sake of alliance, his hands, which were twitching, would have already killed the man. I was caught by Leader Moyong Kong and Hong Pilwu, I don't know what you were talking about. Nam Gunkyong spoke awkwardly as his real identity was revealed. However, Nam Gunkyong had no other option but to side with the Yulin. I should never get taken in by those men. The demonic cult would rip him open to know everything about the organization, and his death would be the obvious result. He would be tortured so they would get the information they wanted. Still, weren't you the one who got him, Hubong? Lord. When Hubong was getting annoyed, Chun Yeowun came towards them after capturing No Du-kyung. Unlike when dealing with Hubong, the moment Chun Yeowun appeared, the leaders turned stiff. Even if it is the Lord of Demonic Cult, we shouldn't just hand him over. His power is not normal. They were both terrified in their hearts, because they were looking at a monster with their very own eyes. However, the loss they would face from losing Nam Gun-kyung was too great. Great leader. Hong Pal-woo, a leader, glanced in the direction of great leader Imok, asking for help. And he came forward, as it was only appropriate for the leaders of each side to have a conversation. Nam Gun-kyung sent a telepathic message to Imok. I apologize. If I get taken over, the information of the organization and the secrets within the faction will all fall into the hands of the demonic cult. If that happens, not only the forces of justice, but the entire Yulin will be in great danger. Are you fine with that? The reason why the leaders were going so far to protect him was because they heard the same message from Nam Gun-kyung too. While contemplating what to do, when he heard that voice, Imok seemed to make up his mind. There is truth in the words of Nam Gun-kyung. It felt dangerous to let the demonic cult know more about the information of the Yulin faction. Even then, the battle just proved that the demonic cult was a lot stronger than before. If we let him get any more powerful, balance within the three major factions may be completely disrupted. Great leader Imok, who was struggling, finally decided to help. To not let Nam Gun-kyung be taken. That was the decision Imok came to. Pack. Imok, who made up his mind, stepped out in front of the leaders and spoke to Chun Yeowun boldly. Lord Chun, you can understand this, right? Excuse me? Even if your man managed to injure the leader, in the end, it was our two leaders who caught him, making sure that he didn't escape. Considering this, you cannot deny that his life should be given to us. I can't. Phew. Before Imok could finish speaking, Chun Yeowun sighed and pulled something with his hand. Wound. Hook. B-body. The body of Nam Gun-kyung, who was behind the leaders, floated into the air and flew in the direction of Chun Yeowun. Imok grabbed him in the process. Pack. What is this? He was getting angry due to the sudden action of Chun Yeowun. Chun Yeowun didn't even care and pulled him. Whoa! What strength! The power was thrilling to feel. Nam Gun-kyung was caught between the power of two major heads of Wulin, the great leader and the lord of the demonic cult. Gre great leader. Don't let go. However, even when Imok tried to forcefully hold him, the gap in sheer power was too wide. After not being able to hold on for too long, the clothes of Nam Gun-kyung suddenly tore off. Tear. G great leader. This. Wing. Tear. Ike. Nam Gun-kyung's body soon flew around and got into Chun Yeowun's hand. Nam Gun-kyung, whose head was in Chun Yeowun's hand, went pale, not knowing what to do. What is this? Leader Nam Gun-kyung. Chun Yeowun looked at Imok and the leaders of the forces of justice with a cynical smile. You were saying that he belonged to the person who caught him, so this person's life is now in my hands, right? Chapter 399. Rise to the 5 Strongest Warriors. Part 2. Did he just provoke the great leader? This. Great leader Imok and the leaders of the forces of justice were speechless. Seeing Nam Gun-kyung in Chun Yeowun's hand, no one could object anymore. He cleverly used their words against them. Then I'll be taking this one. Clench. When no one else objected anymore, Chun Yeowun clenched his hands, which were holding on to the head of Nam Gun-kyung. Nam Gun-kyung looked at Imok with a contemplating look and shouted. Great leader. How can you just give up like this? If I get taken by them, then. Shut up. Tata Tatal. HMMP. HMMPP. Before he could finish his words, Chun Yeowun pressed the blood points on his throat. After his blood points were pressed, Nam Gun Kyong couldn't do anything else other than moan. Pung Chungwon, the sixth leader, who saw that situation unfold in front of him, took a step ahead and spoke. Goodness, Lord Chun. Have some courtesy for the alliance. Can't you just hand over Nam Gun Kyong to us? He is a leader of the forces of justice too, just saying. Unlike the other leaders, Pung Chungwon was the only one who was acquainted with Chun Yeowun. Considering their relationship, he tried not to step in at each situation, but thinking that handing over Nam Gun Kyong was rather precarious, so he decided to speak out. Despite his intervention, Chun Yeowun didn't let go of Nam Gun Kyong. Bewildered, Pung Chungwon raised his voice. Are you really going to act like this? Without even blinking, Chun Yeowun asked. Leader Chungwon, if it were you, would you let go of an enemy who tried to kill you? Well, that would. It was true that Yulin was divided in the Jin Castle, and Nam Gun Kyong was the head of an organization which wanted to execute Chun Yeowun and all the warriors of the demonic cult. When Pung Chungwon didn't answer, Chun Yeowun looked at the other leaders and spoke in a cold tone. Using courtesy to the alliance to make things go your way is an easy way out. Are you all trying to protect Nam Gun Kyong as your colleague? Whoa. When Chun Yeowun reached out his hand, one of the corpses from Jin Castle flew towards him. One of the members of the organization's body, whose head has been cut off, flew in. They were the ones who lost their pain and emotions, the ones who wouldn't die unless their heads were cut off. Are you afraid that this thing he used will get into our cult? That is. If you wanted to protect Nam Gun Kyong from the very beginning, shouldn't you have persuaded him before the battle to strengthen your numbers? The leaders couldn't respond to those words at all. As Chun Yeowun said, there was only one reason for Yulin to protect Nam Gun Kyong. The method of the extreme martial body. It was to prevent the fall of the procedure which created non-humans who felt no pain. They feared that it could fall into the hands of the demonic cult. Surely the Yulin could try to use it too, but it wouldn't be as scary as letting the demonic cult have it. Not a single person opened their mouth, except Mok. He very cautiously opened his mouth and started to speak. Lord Chun, I'll be honest with you. As all the warriors in the castle saw, that skill is too dangerous. As you said, I am concerned about that getting misused by the cult. Great leader Mok expressed his opinion without sugar-coating it. There was only one reason why he was honest. Because there was always a chance of abuse of power in any faction, he asked the demonic cult about keeping Nam Gun Kyong as he was too worried about the information leaking out. At Mok's words, Hong Palwu and Moyong Kong admired him in their hearts. Obviously, speaking out like this meant that the chance of Lord Chun taking away Nam Gun Kyong by force was eliminated. Even Jigul Yongun appreciated it and continued. Exactly. As great leader Mok said, we are concerned about such abuse. If Lord Chun has no such intention, you should punish him according to the Wulin. Placing him in captivity isn't a problem, right? Oh. In addition to the accusation from Mok, Jigul Yongun's words made the other leaders filled with joy. As a result, Chun Yeowun, the lord of the demonic cult, lost the justification to take Nam Gun Kyong. If he took the prisoner forcefully, it would be like saying that he has the intention of using that extreme martial technique. Lord of the demonic cult, you will have to concede this time. Can you really come out and say that you have malicious intent in a place where the warriors of Yulin are gathered? Whatever choice was made, it was beneficial to Yulin. If he gave up Nam Gun Kyong, then they would end up learning about the technique he used, and if Chun Yeowun still insisted on taking him away, they could spread the news that the demonic cult was trying to use dangerous techniques. They all thought that Chun Yeowun was in trouble. Chun Yeowun, who was silent, shook his head. Even if you are smart, there is no favorable answer for this particular situation. Seeing that, Chun Yeowun smacked his lips, convinced that his plan worked. And Chun Yeowun answered. There is truth to that statement. Even the 6 swords, who were close by, were shocked to hear Chun Yeowun's words. It looked like he really was ready to hand over the man to Yulin. Yes. Chun Yeowun, who thought that Chun Yeowun was stepping back, decided to push his luck even further and make Chun Yeowun more uncomfortable. After all, Lord Chun is also under the guidance of the heavens. I know that Lord Chun has no such malicious intent. He was purposely pushing Chun Yeowun. If they used power, no one could go against Chun Yeowun. Which was why he used words. Next, he spoke to the members of Yulin. Leader, can you bring me leader, Nam Gunkyong? Wait. What is it? When Chun Yeowun suddenly stopped him, Chun Yeowun, who was anxious, asked cautiously. There was no way he could find a way out of the situation, yet, the fact that Chun Yeowun was a divine master was what made him tremble. Let's make this clear. What do you mean? The forces of the great heaven as another member and also their head, someone called Hoju. That was information Lord Chun sent to our great leader, right? Chun Yeowun was the one who sent the information regarding the organization that the Yulin factions were unaware of. Based on that, the forces of justice were able to find out the traces of members who joined it before the treaty. However, the man called Hoju and another member couldn't be found. Since Nam Gunkyong was of a high position and said that he was the only one who knew about Hoju, they were thinking of using this opportunity to find him. Catch them. Ah? Chun Yeowun realized what Chun Yeowun's words meant. This man, he really was a new kind of lord which the demonic cult never had before. With a voice full of determination, Chun Yeowun spoke. We will. It was something that Lord Chun has trusted us with, so we'll most definitely see it through. Please trust us. You should. If you fail to catch them, I will never forgive the forces of justice or the Yulin, who will end up creating trouble for my cult. Chun Yeowun's expression turned sour at the warning. Rather than a request, it sounded more like a threat. The words were closer to intimidation, though. Chun Yeowun hesitantly answered, knowing that they weren't words filled with malice. Quack. I understand. That will never happen. Nice. Then you can take him. At those words, Chun Yeowun asked subordinate Jaching. Bring him, Jaching. Oh, yes, 13th leader. The man went closer and tried to pick up Nam Gunkyong, who had a lot of blood on him. Puk. Quack. Drip. Dark blood flowed out of Nam Gunkyong's swollen eyes. Shockingly, his broad forehead was pierced with a sword in an instant. Tremble. Nam Gunkyong shook violently before he fell down. Everyone was stunned as they stared blankly at the dead Nam Gunkyong. At the sudden turn of events, none of the leaders could hide their shock. What is this? Didn't you decide to hand him over to us? Chun Yeowun's face turned red as he shouted. It wasn't agreed that the prisoner would be handed over and then not be killed. Chun Yeowun spoke with a cold expression. I don't remember saying that I would give him to you alive. What? Everyone was speechless as they looked at Chun Yeowun, who spoke in a provoking manner. Indeed. Hu Bong, who was seeing this, and the 6 swords, who listened, were all smiling. It was impossible for Chun Yeowun, the lord they knew, to just hand over what was his so politely. On the other hand, Imok strongly shouted back. Lord Chun, this isn't a situation to act like this. This is an act that looks like you are insulting us. Insult? Right, how could you kill Nam Gunkyong, whom you decided to hand over to us? Imok pointed his finger at the dead man. Such a death was unfair to a man who tried to live through the war using every tactic he could. Chun Yeowun calmly asked Imok, who was furious. Are you contradicting what Leader Jekyll just said? What the hell does that have to do? He just said it a moment back. He said to punish this man in Wolin's way, right? What? With those words, Chun Yeowun looked at Jekyll Yeowun. Jekyll Yeowun was taken aback by those words. Obviously he said that, but it was only to pressure Chun Yeowun. But he just used those words as an excuse to kill the man. Oh no. Lord Chun. What I said earlier didn't mean, go. Huh. With a sudden rise in energy, the people present around turned stiff. It felt like they were standing on a slope with a knife to their throats. Jekyll Yeowun opened his cold lips. The Dark King. The person who released the energy was Mara Kim. He was standing left to Chun Yeowun, a man famous for bringing death. Mara Kim spoke in a low voice. Leader Jekyll, who do you think is standing in front of you? WH. Are you trying to change the words you said to the Lord? If that is the case, I won't forgive you. It felt like Mara Kim was ready to kill him at any moment. Jekyll Yeowun tried to think of what had to be done. Woon. When? All of a sudden, the members of the demonic cult gathered around him. It was as if they were protesting for insulting their lord. With a sneering voice, Chun Yeowun spoke to the bewildered leaders. Well, if he was a man who hit your backs, shouldn't it be fine taking back his corpse? The so-called technique that you are so worried about being misused won't happen now. What? Does that mean he never intended to use the technique? At those words, every single leader was confused. There was no need for the technique. The leaders didn't know, but the person who developed that technique was currently in the demonic cult. Until recently, those who were delighted that the demonic cult wouldn't be able to get their hands on the technique were in utter shock at the failure of their plan. Huh. How did this? It was only then that Jekyll Yeowun realized what Chun Yeowun had been scheming. Chun Yeowun didn't aim for the technique from the beginning. Quack. This is what he meant when he said he wouldn't forgive those who threatened the demonic cult. The true goal of Chun Yeowun was to find the real head of the organization. But that didn't mean that he would give up Nam Gun Kyung to the forces of justice, who were completely unaware of the existence of the organization until Chun Yeowun told them. The demonic cult meddled in the forces of justice and made them search for the organization. We were outplayed. Thud. Jekyll Yeowun, unable to hold in his rage, bit his lower lip. Lord of demonic cult. It turned out to be a foolish mistake to intervene. The results ended up turning bizarre. Thanks to that, not just Jekyll Yeowun, but everyone was able to know one thing. He really is the current lord of demonic cult. No hesitation in his moves. They had to accept the fact that Chun Yeowun was completely different to the previous lord of the demonic cult that they knew. Chapter 400. Rise to the 5 Strongest Warriors. Part 3. What was it called again? The Tiger's Momentum? The momentum of the demonic cult side, including that of Lord Chun Yeowun's, was like a flooding wave that had long surpassed the current Yulin forces. We can't help it. Great leader Mok sighed deeply. Contrary to the demonic cult side, the Yulin and the forces of justice had fewer than 100 people, including their leaders, standing unscathed after the battle. However, the demonic cult still had over 1,000 people. Of course, even if the cult had no warriors standing, it would be no exaggeration to call the lord of the demonic cult, Chun Yeowun, a disaster level one-man army who couldn't be defeated. The bottom line was that it was impossible for them to bring down the lord of the demonic cult no matter what they would try to do. Sigh. Another sigh. Great leader Mok's thoughts when he took the first step into the Jin Castle for the ceremony were different compared to what was actually going on in his mind right now. He thought that the situation in Wolin would change. And the result was. For the time being, it is the time of Lord Chun The entire place has become a place where the existence of Chun Yeowun is absolute. Now the entire Wulin would know of his greatness. In a situation where everyone was tense after being surrounded by the warriors of the demonic cult, the great leader opened his mouth. Enough. Great leader? While everyone was nervous, their eyes turned towards the great leader. Lord Chun. We too had absolutely no intention of abusing that technique. Lord Chun said that he resolved the enmity he had with Nam Gunpyeong out of concern for his cult, but I can no longer turn a blind eye after this. Ah. How could this be? At the words of the great leader, who took a step back, sighs flowed from everywhere. The feeling of concession was entirely different. It was like the man, who was the most respected figure in a faction and one of the 5 strongest warriors, was deciding to kneel because of the overwhelming power of the lord of the demonic cult. I am sorry to all the warriors and leaders. The great leader, Imok, shook his head slightly as he looked at each of the leaders of the forces of justice and Yulin factions, who couldn't hide their disappointment. However, this was a choice he had to make. If Chun Yeowun really was what he had shown so far, then it would be impossible for the Yulin to stay strong if friction rose between the two. Great leader. I know your intentions are good. Of course, not everyone was disappointed. Peng Chungwon, a longtime member of the Mount Hua sect, and Hong Palwu believed that this judgment was indeed correct. It was humiliating, but this had to be done. Even the strongest men were said to have endured more terrifying things than this, so what is the problem with letting go of the pride? They sent their sympathetic gazes to ease Imok's heavy heart. Imok looked at Chun Yeowun and spoke. Hack. Lord Chun. I apologize that the situation turned uncomfortable because of the incident with Nam Gunpyeong. So, how about the Lord and I go back and discuss the future together? Imok held his posture while clasping his hands together. Chun Yeowun, who looked at Imok, raised his hand. The warriors of the demonic cult, who encircled them quickly, retreated as if they were never there. Woo! HIA. Seeing that, the leaders of factions and the forces of justice sighed in relief. If the situation had gotten any worse, it wouldn't seem strange for another battle to happen. I put in enough pressure so the matter would stop right here. In fact, even Chun Yeowun had no plans to push his luck any further with the Yulin. Although the battle was one, they didn't get to deal with the Blade God's 6 martial clan, which meant that he couldn't break the alliance with Yulin's forces of justice yet, especially because the forces of evil seemed to be joining hands with the Blade God's 6 martial clan. It was too early to break the alliance. Let's hold on a little bit longer. The corners of Chun Yeowun's mouth rose slowly. The Dragon Palace in the Empire. The emperor sat solemnly on the throne and on a seat which was lower than his was first Prince Zhu Taikon, who was given the title of the Crown Prince starting from the Nano festival. Although nothing was said outside of the palace, Zhu Taikon had turned into a catalyst in the shrine incident and eventually took the place of Crown Prince. He was gleaming on the inside. However, the atmosphere in the throne room was too heavy for him to smile. All because they had to focus on one event. In the middle of the throne room was Yangzhou, the northern commander and an eunuch of West Spear, both kneeling on one knee. In front of them was a round piece of iron, about twice the size of a male fist. The emperor and the others who saw that were astonished. How could such a group of people use weapons that hold gunpowder, which are only used within the military? In addition, this bomb seemed a lot stronger than theirs. Apart from the non-aggression treaty, explosives were dangerous weapons of lethality that were prohibited by the laws of the empire. Possession of bombs was a problem, but that wasn't the major problem. What made the emperor furious was the report that bombs were being laid out in the underground of the Jin castle. Does that mean that they plotted such an outrageous conspiracy to kill the officials and the prince, who would go there on my behalf? They really are rebels. I can't just sit back and watch this anymore. This is it. The emperor immediately ordered the subjugation of the Blade God's six martial clan. Originally, the lord of the demonic cult had informed the emperor that he would take care of them, but the Blade God's six martial clan had gone too far for the emperor to stay still. Baek Jae-jae, the supreme commander, and southern commander Yeon Namgung led 2,000 guards along with 10,000 soldiers to the Jin castle. For the first time since the founding of the empire, they were going to declare war on a ruling faction. But what? They're coming back already? Within a few hours after the military was deployed, they received a report that Supreme Commander Baek Jae-jae was returning already. The emperor was waiting to know what happened. Just then, the eunuchs in the throne room, who were outside, shouted, "Your Majesty, the Supreme Commander, Baek Jae-jae, is requesting to enter. Send him in." The emperor's orders fell and Baek Jae-jae, who was wearing grey solid armor, hurried into the room. "I, Baek Jae-jae, the Supreme Commander, request an audience with His Majesty." As soon as Baek Jae-jae greeted him, the emperor asked what he was most curious about. "Why did the Supreme Commander return when it hasn't been long since your deployment?" The guards and the soldiers hadn't returned yet, but the commanders were the only ones who came back since they had to inform the emperor of the situation directly. "Your Majesty, before the Imperial army of the Empire arrived at the castle, the spies and rebels in the castle had already been annihilated." The entire group of rebels were annihilated? The emperor's eyes lit up with curiosity. At the request from the lord of the demonic cult, he lent him the armors of guards and soldiers. However, he didn't expect the end of the war in such a short amount of time. Didn't it happen too fast? Even if it was a battle between martial arts users, it was too fast. Baek Jae-jae said the same thing again. It was definite that the battle was over. As the emperor ordered, we rushed to Jin Castle. We first sent in excellent guards to check out the situation. All the officials in the throne room were doubting their ears at the report of Baek Jae-jae. At the time when the northern commander and the eunuch escaped from the Jin Castle, it wasn't like there were no other officials of the palace. Some members of the guards were present for the sake of monitoring the situation. Through them, the guards were told about the amazing things that unfolded in the Jin Castle and were reported to the commanders. Even the Supreme Commander Baek Jae-jae, who first reported it, couldn't believe what he was hearing. Is that even possible? Most of the reports that he heard were so ridiculous, they made it sound like Chun Yeowun had surpassed the stage of a human being. Later, it was told that he was the one who killed the vast majority of enemies. They reported that it was not a battle, but a slaughter. Besides, what? He flew into the air and made swords rain down from the sky? When talking about Sky Flash, even the emperor seemed at a loss for words. There was no other way to explain the air swords which brought in bloodshed. Hugh, how could a human body perform? Admiral Seo Tae-sik of the Cardinal Spear mumbled to himself, not being able to believe the report he just heard. The admirals and the commanders were all well aware of martial arts, but never had they imagined that a divine master would be such a monster. He is no human. I am really fortunate to be allied with Lord Chun. Crown Prince Zhu Taikon once again realized that his choice wasn't wrong. Chun Yeowun, the lord of the demonic cult, was too dangerous to make an enemy out of. That was why the army returned already, Your Majesty. When the Supreme Commander Baek Jae-jae was done with his report, the entire throne room was filled with silence. That was how shocking the information about Chun Yeowun, the lord of the demonic cult, was. Your Majesty must be very surprised. As a ruler of an empire, a monster with that much power was a threat to him. Maybe he was feeling even more fear than before. Everyone was in deep concern when the emperor, who had been silent, slowly opened his mouth. There will never be a change in the state religion until my time ends. A fact which no one could dispute. Time passed quickly and a full month had passed since the day of the Nano festival. News went around very fast. It didn't take long for the events in the Jin castle to spread throughout the Jianghu. Although they participated in the victory of the alliance, they were humiliated to the extent of being overpowered. To hide this humiliation, they announced that the battle in the Jin castle of Tongo was something that the forces of justice and the demonic cult's alliance planned together to defeat the forces of evil and the Blade God's six martial clan, but there was no way the truth could stay hidden. The heads of multiple factions under Yulin had witnessed it with their very own eyes. Chun Yeowun's monstrous strength spread throughout all of Wulin, and the humiliation the forces of justice faced spread as well. The forces of justice strongly denied it in Yulin, but the consequences that followed made it undeniable. In a fortress of the 10,000 mountains, a middle-aged man with short hair was drinking something while he was on the bed. He was the former Lord, Chun Yeowun. After months of staying in a coma, he finally woke up. He was extremely skinny as he hadn't moved for a long time, however the side effects had disappeared from his body and his lively spirit returned. Gasp! Gasp! Kul, drink it slowly, Lord. Next to him, a middle-aged man in shabby clothes with an eye patch was seated. It has been 3 days since the former Lord has woken up. However, he was extremely weak, and it took 2 days for Submang to get permission to see him. Submang visited the former Lord from the day before and informed Chun Yeowun about all that had happened. Coincidentally, Chun Yeowun's memories after the battle with the Blade God six martial clan's warriors were like shattered fragments. He could hardly remember anything from that day. Keep talking, right guardian? Chun Yeowun wiped off the medicine he was drinking with his sleeve, while Submang continued talking. How far did I tell? Yeowun, no, you were talking about the current lord. Calling not himself, but Chun Yeowun as the lord felt a little awkward for Chun Yeowun. When he lost consciousness and woke up, so many things seemed to have changed. As soon as he woke up, he couldn't get used to people calling him the former lord. Ah. Right, as I was saying earlier, the lord is very busy with the work of the academy. Hugh. A sigh escaped from Chun Yeowun's mouth. It was shocking enough to hear it all over again, and yet it was still unbelievable. It was said that the entire Hunan province was officially under the domain of the demonic cult. And the Yulin people and the forces of justice tolerated it? Tolerate? There was nothing else they could do. While promoting the Sky Demon Order, which was currently the state religion of the Empire, the Imperial Order built a branch of the cult not only in the Imperial Palace but also in the capital. Since it was the domain of the Yulin, there was no way that they would have agreed to it. Since the announcement was made by the Emperor, the Yulin announced that it would accept it by honoring the Emperor and respecting the alliance. Actually, that wasn't it. Hee. As the faction heads who joined the forces of the Great Heaven were annihilated, they lost nearly 30% of their power. And if they immediately broke the alliance with the demonic cult right now, they would get surrounded by all the enemies, including what is left of the Blade God's six martial clan. All of this was possible because the Lord showed incredible devotion in the Battle of Jin Castle. That was the biggest reason. With the war, Yulin realized that there was no chance of winning a war against the current lord of the demonic cult. That's why even when it was humiliation, they conceded. That child reached Divine Master level. That was the most startling news for Chun Yeowun. It was astonishing that so many things happened since he lost consciousness. Chun Yeowun spoke in a frustrated voice. It seems like the title of being one of the 5 strongest warriors should be passed down to the Lord. Hearing those words, Submang licked his lips and spoke cautiously. Former Lord. I apologize, but the current Lord is already considered one of the 5 strongest warriors due to the war. What? For real? 5 strongest warriors. A title that only 5 people, who stand at the top of the Wulin, hold. It was unprecedented for a warrior to attain that title at Chun Yeowun's current age. After hearing that, Submang, who took pride in being the teacher of the current lord, couldn't hide his joy. Chun Yeowun was suddenly engulfed in a strange feeling. It was thrilling that Yeowun and his child, who struggled to learn martial arts, stood tall, all by himself. Chun Yeowun was looking at Submang, who was extremely happy for some reason, and asked, "Come, if he has become one of the 5 strongest warriors, he probably has a name worthy of the title." At that question, Submang answered with a wide smile. "He got a name that suits the cult best." "Best?" "Demon God. The Lord is being called the Demon God." Chun Yeowun's new name, which he obtained after being recognized as one of the 5 strongest warriors, is truly befitting. Demon God. Regardless of whether he was the Lord or not, the members of the cult considered him a demon. However, due to his thrilling actions, everyone else called him a god. Demon God. Chun Yeowun couldn't contain his trembling at Submang's words. It wasn't that he was surprised by the crazy and wonderful name, but it was because after the previous lords, this was the second time that the title of Demon God was given to someone after Chun Ma.